Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Noor Waseem, and today I will be teaching you two sessions. One is hormonal changes in pregnancy, and the other one is hormonal changes in lactation and parturition. So, before I begin, I would like to tell you guys that both of these are Dr. Abdul Jabbar's lectures, but I have tried my best to simplify them in a manner that's easier for you. I've also added my own animation so that you guys can visualize the way I want you guys to visualize the concept. So let's begin. Also, if you guys have any doubt, please feel free to contact me on my number or my email. I'll be more than happy to help. And these lectures are very interesting. Contrary to the popular belief that people say that repro is tough, repro was really interesting for me. So I loved repro back then. So inshallah, I hope the sessions go well. And please, if you do have any questions, please put in the chat box and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Okay, so let's begin. Bismillah. Okay, so starting from the basics, we have the primordial follicle, then we have the primary follicle, secondary follicle, antral follicle, and pre-ovulatory follicle. Now, it is the follicle that's produced it's the egg that is released during the pre-ovulatory phase, as in during ovulation. When this egg is released, this is the one that would undergo fertilization. So our main focus would be this today. Just giving you a brief overview of what's around the oocyte. So this is the oocyte. The black lining that you see is the zona pellucida, and the cells around it is corona radiata. And if you guys can see this light green kind of thing, it's called the cumulus ophores, or you can say that the inner layer of cumulus ophores is basically corona radiata. Now, talking about the sperm, we have the mitochondria here, we have the sperm's tail, we have the sperm head, which has the cholesterol, and there is acrosome, and there is a nucleus. Okay, so this was just a brief overview. So it's when the egg is released at ovulation. Remember when I was talking about this egg? It's basically this egg that's here during ovulation. That's the one that's being fertilized. So at ovulation, which typically occurs around day 14 or 15, the egg is fertilized. As you guys can see, there is a sperm here. The egg is being fertilized, and then there is cleavage. A zygote is formed, it undergoes cleavage, a morula is formed, blastocyst is formed, and eventually it will be implanted. Okay. Again, like I mentioned, we have the cumulus ophorus, we have the corona radiata around the oocyte. So for successful fertilization, the sperm must breach three barriers, as in for the sperm to enter the egg, it needs to cross three barriers that are around the egg in order to get in and fertilize. So what are the three barriers? One is the expanded cumulus, or you can also call the cumulus ophorus, zona pellucida, the one that I showed you up in the black outline, and plasma membrane of the egg. So the sperm needs to pass these three in order to fertilize. Okay, so very important, although I am bringing it earlier in the slide, because I want you all to remember this. It's like if you have this in the beginning, the next few slides would be easier for you. Now we have something which is basically called the placenta. And then we have the baby here, and then we have the mom here. So basically, placenta is the connection between both the baby and the mom. So there is transfer and diffusion of gases, food particles, and all the nutrients that are important for the baby. The placenta, since it's between the mother and the baby, so it means mother also contributes to the placenta, and the baby also contributes in the formation of placenta. Part of the mother's placenta is called decidua. Part of the baby's placenta is called chorion. So this is a chorionic sac, which is basically a membrane around the fetus. But you see this red outline here. This is basically called chorion. It's contributing to the placenta. So in other words, decidua is here and the chorion is here. So this basically forms the placenta. Okay, the connection between the mother and baby. Coming to the introduction, human reproduction, it basically involves internal insemination, internal fertilization, and gestation. Internal insemination is basically the release of sperms into the female body. Then we have internal fertilization, which is basically the sperm fusing with the egg, and we have gestation, which is basically the growth and the developmental period of the the zygote. Okay, now, like I just said, placenta. Chorion is basically the part of the placenta that is contributed from the fetus, and decidua, it is contributed from the mother. Pregnancy, it supports three endocrine system. You know how pregnancy is all under the control of hormones, and for sure we need an endocrine system here. But what are the three areas that are involved within the system? It's basically the maternal side, the fetal side, and the placental side. Why is it done? That is done to promote the growth and nutrition of the fetus. The timing of parturition. Parturition means time, the time of birth, or the ones the yeah, it's basically the childbirth. And the next one is preparation of the maternal mammary glands. Okay, so this is the endocrine functions of during the pregnancy, the main ones. Okay, pre-fertilization changes. Remember, for fertilization, only one sperm is normally allowed to enter the egg. That is in normal circumstances. And if it's more than that, we will talk about it. Okay, so once the sperm and egg fuse, that is called successful fertilization. And that happens in the ampulla of the oviduct. What happens with the sperm and egg fuse? The moment they fuse, there is an intracellular signaling cascade within the oocyte. Okay, so what is this cascade responsible for? Why do we have this reaction there? So upon fertilization, like I said, a cascade is then initiated, and then there are two actions. One is that it prevents polyspermy. Like I just said, for an oocyte to be fertilized, it normally one sperm should enter. But if there is more than one sperm entering, that's going to form something called polyspermy, which means too much sperms entering the oocyte, and that can be very lethal. Okay, that can even lead to miscarriage for sure. The next one is egg activation. You know how egg is basically arrested in meiosis 2 of the metaphase stage. Once the sperm fuses with the egg, upon this signaling cascade, the egg resumes meiosis. Okay, now it's allowed to proceed further from metaphase 2. Okay, one important thing that sperms undergo when they're about to fertilize is something which is called capacitation. Now, capacitation basically means activating the sperm. Why? Because you have to activate the sperm in order to have the egg fertilized. Now, what happens in capacitation? There are four main things that happen in during capacitation, and remember, these are high yield. One is that there is a removal of cholesterol. Remember in the picture when I showed that there was a cholesterol over here? You see this yellow colored thing over here? Even though like it's just for you guys to visualize, but just remember there's a cholesterol on the sperm head, and that needs to be removed. The second one is removal of glycoproteins from the sperm membrane that block the binding of the egg. Now, if the sperm does not undergo capacitation, what happens? There will be cholesterol on top, there will be glycoproteins. And when this happens, the sperm is now prevented to fuse with the egg, and hence no fertilization. Okay? The next one is the change in membrane potential, allowing the calcium entry and activation of the acrosome reaction. What is acrosome reaction? We'll talk about it in the next slide, but it's important to have acrosome reaction during capacitation. The last one is phosphorylation of numerous protein for sperm motion. Like I said, capacitation is basically activating the sperm. So one of the steps is to increase its motion. So it basically means when there is the entry of calcium, when there is, sorry, when there's the entry of calcium here, oh my gosh, when there's the entry of calcium inside the sperm, that will basically increase the speed of the sperm. It's more like when the sperm is in a wave-like motion, undergoing phosphorylation will make the sperm to move in a whip-like motion. Whip is like extremely fast, okay? And it needs that in order to reach the egg, okay? So again, entry of sperm hyperactivity, whip-like motion of sperm, and once the capacitation is done, the cumulus cells of the oocyte are approached. Now, first thing, just to summarize, first of all, there is fusion, intracellular signaling cascade, and then capacitation. What happens after capacitation? After capacitation, the sperm moves towards the egg, okay? So there are four main reactions that you all need to remember. Just give me a minute. I have my own animations here. Okay. Okay. All right, the first one, I want you to look at the picture on the left while I'm explaining, okay? So the first thing that happens in order to facilitate the sperm enter the egg is that the cumulus layer and the zona pellucida is breached, okay? So like I said, the yellow here is basically the cumulus layer, and the black here is the zona pellucida. First thing is the sperm comes nearby, and then it releases two things. One is hyaluronidase, and the other one is the enzyme acrosome. It releases hyaluronidase, the one in green here, in order to digest the cumulus or the yellow layer. You know, if you guys can see closely, the green color here is hyaluronidase, and once it's around here, it's trying to digest the cumulus layer. Okay, and the other one, the acrosome enzyme, is basically released in order to digest the zona pellucida. Okay, so remember, hyaluronidase to digest the cumulus cells, acrosome to digest the zona pellucida. Okay, this was step one. Okay, now talking about step two. Now the sperm and egg membranes bind each other through receptors, isomo1 and Juno. Now, let me zoom in. Okay, now the first step is done, which is breaching the cumulus cells and the zona pellucida. What happens next? Next, we basically have the fusion of the membrane, the sperm membrane and the egg membrane here. So if I am to zoom in here, so this is the sperm surface, and it has the isomo1 protein or the receptor, and the egg surface has Juno. Okay, so in the second step, isomo1 and Juno are basically like attached to each other, or they're more like receptors, which facilitates the sperm entry into the egg, and that resumes the second meiotic division. Okay, coming to the third one. This is important. Please remember the third one. Okay, again, just a recap. The first one, zona pellucida and cumulus is breached. The second one, the fusion of isomo1 and Juno. Third one, we have something which is called the egg activation. Now, egg activation basically means the sperm egg fusion allow a sperm-specific phospholipase, which is phospholipase zeta, to release intracellular calcium. Okay, let me do like this. Please look at the picture on the left. So the next step, what happens? Then when there is this fusion, look, when there is a fusion of the sperm and egg, there is something called phospholipase zeta released from the sperm. What happens? This undergoes the IP3 and DAG pathway, and that releases calcium. What does this calcium do? Let's come here. Now, this calcium that is basically released after PLC zeta underwent the IP3 DAG pathway, this calcium, it basically goes around the zona pellucida, and it releases something which is called the cortical granules. And this is called the cortical reaction. And this is our last and fourth reaction, which basically says calcium causes exocytosis of hydrolytic enzymes that modify zona proteins, which is a cortical reaction, blocking entry of more sperm. So in that case, only one sperm enters the egg. Again, so once the calcium enters, it basically modifies the zona proteins. Okay, so like remember I said the black layer is the zona pellucida, so it's gonna modify the proteins around zona pellucida, and that is called the zona proteins. Okay, and the one in green here are the zona proteins, and they're going to form a layer around the zona pellucida from inside, and that's called the cortical reaction. Once this happens, once this green dotted layer is formed around the zona pellucida, we call this a cortical reaction, and it's very important because it will block, like that's like a full stop to the entry of more sperms. You see, none of the sperms is allowed to enter now. Okay, so please remember these. All four of these are really important. Okay, and yeah, like I said, that if there is additional sperm entering the egg, it can form a triploid cell, which is lethal, and polyspermy again, and it leads to 10 to 50% of the miscarriages. Okay, and this was basically the summary. And actually, this was the picture that Dr. Abdul Jabbar had in his slides, but you can see it's there's so much information, and I was like, no, it's not good for you guys to learn. Like, it's good for you guys to learn from this if you understand, but I tried to simplify this into my own animation. So step 1, step 2, step 3, remember PLC zeta is very important, which releases intracellular calcium, and then that calcium forms zona proteins around the zona pellucida, and that is called the cortical reaction. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead. This is like you guys can study from this. This was the one in Dr. Abdul Jabbar's slides. It's pretty much what's there in my animations and what's written, but if you want to go through it, you can. Okay. All right. Now, going ahead, let's talk about. Okay, there are no questions. Okay, now the menstrual cycle. I would not touch upon it. Like I just briefly go over it because I'm sure you guys would have already covered it. But my main thing here is, upon ovulation, when the oocyte is released, okay, and ovulation occurs around day 14. Okay, this is the oocyte. That's basically this. Okay, like just visualize it. The one that's released on ovulation on the 14th day. Remember 14th day. This is the one that's released here. Okay, so what happens on 14th day? An egg is released. Okay, or the oocyte is released, and if there is fertilization to happen, it will happen after around after around ovulation. So oocyte release, the sperms come in, they try to fertilize. So day 14, egg release. Day 15, you can say that there is fertilization. Day 16, okay, I'll come here. So on day 16, there is 2-cell stage. Okay, on day 17, there is 4-cell stage, which divides further. Day 18 divides further. Day 19, morula, divides further from something called the blastocyst. And upon implantation, when it's about to implant, it's usually 21 to 22 days. Okay, so it's on day 22 when the endometrium is now adhesive, it is vascular, and it's secretory. Okay, now the endometrium is like preparing itself for implantation because it knows that, oh, there is fertilization occurring here. So the fertilized egg undergoes all these stages, and around 21 to 22 days, it is where the implantation will occur, and we will talk about this in a while. Okay, talking about early fertilization, what happens in early fertilization? Fertilization to implantation takes typically around 6 days. Let me repeat my point. How does it take 6 days? Remember when I told starting from day 14 to implantation 21 to 22 days? 20 to 21 days, you will, my bad. I think it's nothing, it's 21 to 22 days for implantation. Okay, so when fertilization occurs typically around day 14 or 15. So approximately it's 6 days in between. Okay, there can be plus minuses, so it's 6 days in between. With ideal implantation occurring around day 21 of the menstrual cycle. Again, it can be plus minus 20, 21, 22 days for implantation, but remember that it's day 21. Okay, so during early fertilization, there is increased progesterone in the body, mainly from the corpus luteum. Now, do you remember when there was the LH surge? Okay, and then an egg was released after ovulation upon LH surge, and the remaining structure of the egg was basically called corpus luteum. Now, that corpus luteum helps in maintaining high levels of progesterone. Okay, so once fertilization occurs, in the early days of fertilization, there is increased progesterone because that corpus luteum structure is helping in the production of increased progesterone. Okay, earlier, corpus luteum is responsible for an increase in progesterone. What is its function? It prompts the uterine glands to release nutrient-rich secretions. It prevents uterine contractions. Okay, remember progesterone, it's very important to maintain the state of pregnancy. Also, it tries to keep the endometrium calm. Okay, that is why it tries to prevent the uterine contractions, because you don't want uterine contractions while in pregnancy. If there is uterine contractions, that means menstruation, but you want to keep the pregnancy, so that is why there is high level of progesterone. Okay, also it stops the menstruation, of course, because now there has been conception. Also, it induces the window of receptivity. What is window of receptivity? Window of receptivity is basically a time period during which the endometrium is ready to have the blastocyst implanted. Okay, that basically means the window of receptivity, and it happens around day 21 to 24. Remember, I told that it's basically around day 21 when implantation occurs. So, like I said, there can be plus minuses in these dates. So it's around day 21 to day 24, which is now called the window of receptivity, which means the endometrium is now preparing itself or is ready to accept the blastocyst to be implanted. Okay. And how does it do that? It promotes vascularization, spiral arteries are formed and capillary beds are formed, and it's crucial for nutrient exchange and support. Now, talking about early changes to the embryo. At day 4, after fertilization, morula is formed, okay, during which the outer cells begin transporting fluid into the embryonic mass. I would just come back to this picture. Look, at day 4, after fertilization, a morula is formed, okay? Now, when the structure is formed, the next day, these cells, you see these gray color cells, they try to produce fluid inside the egg. Once they produce fluid in here, you see that now this white area is the fluid. It pushes all these cells to the periphery. You see the gray cells are now at the periphery, and now the structure is called the blastocyst, and the fluid inside is called the blastocele. Okay. All right. Here you go. Over day 4 and 5, the fluid accumulation forms a cavity known as blastocele. I even have a picture here. So you see here, this is basically the blastocele, and this entire structure is blastocyst. Okay, and this happens at day 4 and 5. And the outer cell layer is basically called the trophoblast. Okay, the inner cell layer, it is called the inner cell mass. Okay, or you can also call it as embryoblast. Also, the trophoblast that is adjacent to the inner cell mass. This is the inner cell mass. The trophoblast that is adjacent to the inner cell mass. So this is the trophoblast adjacent to the inner cell mass. This is now called the embryonic pole. Like you can't label it, but the purpose of telling why it's embryonic pole is because this is where it will go and start implantation. Okay, like it's moving towards a pole for implantation. Okay, so that site is called the embryonic pole. Talking about implantation now, we have 3 important points here. So I would come to this picture first. Remember how we spoke that blastocyst has an outer layer, which is basically called the trophoblast, and then we have the inner layer, which is called the embryoblast. So when implantation takes place, or once the blastocyst, it touches the layer of endometrium, the trophoblastic cells, they divide into new cells, which is called the syncytial trophoblast. Okay, and this is the syncytial trophoblast, which would try to invade the endometrium and will help the blastocyst implant. All right, just remember syncytial trophoblast here. Okay, so the first picture, it says that trophoblast, it releases proteases around day 5 or 6 of embryogenesis to digest the zona pellucida. These cells, trophoblasts, they're basically involved in producing an enzyme called proteases, and that digests the zona pellucida. And now the zona pellucida is removed now, and now it's free to enter the endometrium. And this process is called hatching. Okay, hatching means that now the zona pellucida is removed from the egg. Okay, now the next one that we have is that by approximately day 22, the blastocyst gains the ability to attach and implant into the prepared uterine endometrium. So when I'm talking about day 22, let me go back to the picture. And remember when I said that implantation might happen across day 21 to 22, it's basically at this time when the blastocyst is about to be implanted. So it's that day 22 which is being spoken about here. Okay. All right, the next step is that after implantation, okay, now you see like it's almost implanting in, right? A bit of blastocyst is outside, but it's going in right now. The endometrial stroma undergoes something which is called decidualization. The decidualization, remember the word decidua? I told decidua is the contribution of the placenta from the mother's side, right? So of course, now this is the myometrium, the blastocyst is going in. Now the myometrium or the mother side is also going to accept the implantation, but before that, it undergoes something which is called decidualization, so that when the decidua, which is the mother side of the placenta, and chorion, which is the fetal side of the placenta, combine, there is now an easy way to have gas exchange, nutrient exchange, and it supports and nourishes the developing embryo fetus during pregnancy. I hope it's clear. Okay, we've got no questions. Coming back to the picture, like I just said, look, when the blastocyst is implanting and the fetus implanted and the fetus is growing. However, the fetus here is like big for now, but when before, a little bit before that, decidualization start, and there is something called the decidua. So this is basically the decidua. Look, it's like from the myometrium, it's from the mother's side, and we will have the formation of chorion, which is the red color outline here, and this chorion will form villis, and then it's kind of attaching to the decidua, and that forms the placenta. Okay. Same thing here. We have the trophoblast here. We have the syncytial trophoblast here. And once it's implanted, the mother side or the endometrium, look, the maternal side, it forms something called the decidua, which is accepting the implantation. And decidua is the mother side of the placenta. And then chorion would be formed later on, and they would combine, and then that's called the placenta. Okay, function of syncytial trophoblast. Now, syncytial trophoblasts, they secrete a hormone which is called human chorionic gonadotropin hormone that keeps the corpus luteum alive. Okay, you remember a few slides ago I told that corpus luteum is a structure that is left over after ovulation, and corpus luteum is involved in producing high levels of progesterone. So what basically keeps this structure alive, what basically keeps the corpus luteum alive, is basically human chorionic gonadotropin. So HCG keeps the corpus luteum alive, ensuring continued progesterone secretion, crucial for maintaining pregnancy. Here's a tip for you guys. So progesterone, the way how I remember that progesterone is important and like the main hormone here is because I remember it in a way, okay, so P for progesterone and pre for pregnancy, like anything related to pregnancy, it's very important in maintaining pregnancy, especially at week 10. So syncytial trophoblast, it becomes steroidogenic. That means now it's producing progesterone independently. It's no longer depending on corpus luteum to provide its progesterone. This happens during week 10. So this part is very important. Please remember these 2 points. So at week 10, it becomes independent and it produces its own progesterone. It's no longer dependent on the corpus luteum for the progesterone production. All right. So as implantation progresses, the syncytial trophoblast is basically having phagocytic capabilities. Phagocytic as in like trying to eat in the endometrium in order to get in and be implanted. Okay, and to grow in there. So we have the phagocytic capabilities, and which facilitates the bidirectional placental transfer of gases, nutrients, and waste products. To visualize this, this light orange is a syncytial trophoblast. So once it's implanting, what happens, there is phagocytic capabilities from the syncytial trophoblast, okay, from the light orange area. Okay, why it phagocytes is because it needs to be implanted, right? So when it tries to enter and phagocytize, it comes here and it eats up the maternal vein. Okay, the moment there's degradation of that vein or the blood vessel, it forms a structure which is basically called the lacunae. Okay, so the syncytial trophoblast, when invading into the maternal endometrium, it comes in contact with blood vessel, which creates lacunae. Lacunae is basically spaces filled with the maternal blood. Remember how the maternal vein was cut here when it was trying to phagocytize? So that basically forms the lacunae. Which is the degradation of the blood vessel. Now, these lacunae would fuse to form a lacunar network later on. Okay, and just to point here that lacunae is filled with endometrium gland secretions, maternal blood from degraded vessels, and remnants of enzymatically digested matrix. Okay, layers of mature placenta. In the second week of pregnancy, something called the chorionic villi starts to form. Remember how I told that chorion is basically the fetal side of the placenta? So, like these light pink color here, this is basically the villi. It's trying to form in branches in order to increase the surface area. You guys know, like, villi is important for increasing the surface area for absorption. Same way, the chorion, which is the which is the fetal side of the placenta, it's trying to invade in, and it's also gonna form lacunae. Now it's called the chorionic villi, and the reason why it's doing that is because it needs to increase its surface area for absorption. Okay, and at the embryonic pole, the chorionic villi branches out to form chorion frondosum. So this is the embryonic pole, okay, the one that where the implantation was initiated, and that is called the chorion frondosum. Okay, you can also call it chorion, but to be more specific, if it's at the embryonic pole, it's chorion frondosum, which is the fetal side of the placenta, and the uterine decidua adjacent to the chorion frondosum contributes to the formation of maternal side. Decidua is basically this one. You see the where these red ones. So it's basically coming from mother's endometrium. So since it's coming from mother's side, mother, it's called the maternal side of the placenta, and that's called the decidua. Okay. Now, as the fetus develops, the amnion would surround it. Also, by the end, by the start of third trimester, when the amnion it merges with the chorion, which is the placental side of the fetus, it forms something called the amniochorionic membrane. Okay, talking about the mature placenta. Now, the maternal. Just give me a minute. Sorry. Talking about the mature placenta, the mother's endometrium has something which is basically called the spiral arteries. Okay, now those spiral arteries, they supply blood to surround the chorionic villi in the intervillous space. Let me help you guys visualize it. Okay, we have the spiral arteries here, which is these. Okay, the gray spiral arteries, or we can also call them the endometrial arteries. Sorry, my bad, it's not gray, it's the orange ones. Okay, they are basically called the spiral arteries more specifically, but you can also call them endometrial arteries as per this picture. They are basically involved in providing blood around the chorionic villi. Okay, and then the anchoring villi, they extend from the chorionic villi and attach to the uterine lining. Where is the anchoring villi? Look at this structure, anchoring villi. It's basically involved in forming an attachment from the chorionic villi to the uterine lining. So if this is the chorionic villi and this is the uterine lining, this anchoring villi will form a connection and make the connection stronger. So again, it's more like forming a strong connection between chorion and the mother side, which is the decidua. Okay. Also, the villi has a sticky or adhesive layer, which is called the cytotrophoblastic shell, which helps firmly attach the chorion frondosum to the decidua basalis. Okay, so the cytotrophoblastic shell, which is here, you see it's right here. If you could see, it's right here, and that is basically involved in firmly attaching the chorion to the decidua. Okay, so it's what we're talking about here is mainly the connection that's formed between the chorion and the decidua. Okay, talking about the endocrine function of the placenta. Let me see if I have any questions. So no questions. Talking about endocrine function of the placenta. Now, the syncytial trophoblast of the placenta, it produces several steroid and protein hormones. Now, what are the functions of these hormones? They maintain the pregnant state of the uterus. They stimulate the lobulo-alveolar growth of the breast. They are involved in supporting the growth of the fetus. They are involved in regulating aspect of fetal development and also in regulating the timing and progression of childbirth or parturition. Okay, the first hormone of the placenta is human chorionic gonadotropin. And this hormone is basically produced by the syncytial trophoblast. Okay, now syncytial trophoblast, it is basically going to produce HCG. And when is this HCG released? It is released when the fertilized embryo or the fertilized embryo is attached to the wall. That is the time when HCG is produced. Okay, and it's similar to LH, and it binds with high affinity to the LH receptors. Okay, and it prevents luteolysis to maintain high levels of progesterone during the first 10 weeks. Coming back to luteolysis, coming back to corpus luteum. This is the corpus luteum. Remember how at day 14 corpus luteum is formed and the egg is released. The remaining structure is now called corpus luteum, and I told this structure is basically involved in maintaining high levels of progesterone. So this structure typically provides progesterone to the body until 10 weeks. Okay, and until 10 weeks there will be no luteolysis, as in there will be no breakdown of the corpus luteum, and this happens under the influence of human chorionic gonadotropin. HCG, it basically inhibits or prevents luteolysis to maintain the levels of progesterone until week 10, after which, like I told, the cytotrophoblast will start producing its own progesterone at week 10. Okay, so it's also known to be a cause of nausea or morning sickness, and causes hyperthyroidism. So basically, HCG, it can stimulate the TSH receptors. When TSH receptors are stimulated, there is more T3 and T4, and that causes hyperthyroidism. Also, if it's the male fetus, it stimulates the Leydig cells of the male fetus, and in order to have the sexual differentiation and development of the fetus. Okay, these are the functions of HCG, and yeah, these are high yield for sure. Okay, talking about progesterone. Progesterone is also a placental hormone, and the syncytial trophoblast of the placenta, it produces large amounts of progesterone that keeps the myometrium calm or quiet or relaxed and maintains a pregnant uterus. Okay, it's very important to maintain pregnancy. Okay, so I would come to this picture. I will try to simplify this picture as much as I can for you guys. So this is the maternal side, this is the placental side. Here should be the fetal side as well. Okay, on this side. Okay, I hope you guys get it. This is the fetal side, which was not included in the picture, but yeah, you guys can imagine placenta is between the mother and the fetus. Okay, so the mother's liver, it is basically involved in the formation of cholesterol. This cholesterol from the mother's or the maternal side is then transferred or transported to placenta. Okay, once it goes to placenta in the form of VLDL or LDL, this cholesterol is converted to pregnenolone, which is converted to progesterone. Okay, so yeah, you guys know like the precursor of steroid hormones is cholesterol, right? So the moment placenta gets a cholesterol, in this case, it's transferred to pregnenolone and progesterone. Now remember one thing, that this conversion of cholesterol to progesterone does not require the star protein. Now, star protein is the protein that is basically involved in steroidogenesis, for example, in the adrenal gland or in the testes or in the ovary, but in the placenta, it does not require star protein. So this point is very important. Whereas if this steroidogenesis was occurring in other areas, for example, like I said, ovary, testes or adrenal gland, it would require the star protein. So once the progesterone is formed, what happens? It's going to affect the maternal compartment. It will come back to the, not come back, it will come to the maternal compartment once it's formed, and it will have some effects. What are the effects? Progesterone is released into the maternal circulation and is required for implantation and maintenance of pregnancy. Remember, very important for maintenance of pregnancy and keeping the myometrium or the uterus calm or relaxed. Okay, it also induces maternal breast growth and differentiation. All right, So this is what you need to remember. Just to summarize, I know this picture might look tough, but remember the maternal liver releases cholesterol. That cholesterol is transported to the placenta or in the syncytial trophoblast. Cholesterol is converted to pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is converted to progesterone. It comes back and it has its own effects in the maternal compartment, which is basically to keep the uterus or the myometrium calm and relaxed. Also, it is obviously required for implantation and most importantly maintenance of pregnancy, also the breast development and growth. Okay, another hormone, which is the placental hormone, is basically estrogen. Now, okay, also remember when I say syncytial trophoblast, I'm basically talking about placenta because syncytial trophoblast is now part of the placenta. Okay, so to be honest, this was the picture that Dr. Abdul Jabbar had in his slides. It's a very good picture. You can come back to this picture, but I wanted you guys to visualize it in a more easy way and then moving towards the complex. Okay, what happens? Now, talking about this one, estrogen, what happens that the syncytial trophoblast in the placenta, they basically lack something which is called CYP17. Okay, now CYP17 is basically involved in the production of something called DHEAS, which is an androgen. So the adrenal feet, now they don't have CYP17, right? So they cannot form DHEAS. It means they need to get this androgen from somewhere. So what happens? The fetal adrenal gland here, okay, that produces an androgen which is called DHEAS. Okay, DHEAS from the fetal side, it is transported to the placenta. Okay, it comes in here, it is desulfated. Remember how there was an S here and there is no S here now? It is desulfated and that is basically converted to estradiol 17 beta and estrone. Okay, very simple. Remember, DHEAS produced in the fetal adrenal gland moves to the placenta, desulfated, and forms estradiol 17 beta and estrone, which is form of estrogen. Okay, and what are the functions of estrogen here? It increases uteroplacental blood flow, enhances LDL receptor expression in the syncytial trophoblast, and it induces prostaglandin and oxytocin receptors later in pregnancy. Prostaglandin and oxytocin, they're very important in labor. They help in the contraction of the myometrium or uterus, and it helps to push the baby outside. So these two are very important here, and the function of estrogen is to induce those receptors. Also involved in the growth and development of mammary glands, and also directly and indirectly by stimulating the maternal pituitary prolactin. Okay. Okay, so a little bit of complex picture, but it's a very good picture. Fetal pituitary gland, it releases ACTH. Okay, under the influence of ACTH, all this reaction occurs where an androgen called DHEAS is produced. DHEAS, it moves to the placenta. When I say syncytial trophoblast, I basically mean placenta. Moves to the placenta, desulfated. Look, it's desulfated, and it's gonna form estrone and estradiol, which are the forms of estrogen. And this estrogen goes to the maternal compartment and has its effects, like we just mentioned. Okay, talking about human placental lactogen, again, these are very important, and this hormone specifically is important. Now, this hormone is produced by the syncytial trophoblast by day 10. Remember, it is similar to growth hormone and prolactin, and this hormone, it rises throughout pregnancy. Now, two hormones that continuously rise throughout pregnancy is HPL and progesterone. Let me go back to progesterone. Please remember this. Maternal progesterone increases throughout pregnancy. Similarly, human placental lactogen, it also increases throughout pregnancy. Now, what does HPL do? It decreases the mother's sensitivity to insulin. What do I mean by that? Now, the mother has glucose in her body, okay? That glucose would trigger insulin. Normally, in a normal human, that insulin acts on glucose and it stores it into glycogen as an energy reserve and much more. But when in pregnancy, when HPL is released, even though the mother has glucose, the insulin is not going to act on that glucose. Okay, so it decreases the maternal insulin sensitivity, which elevates mother's blood glucose. Okay, because the glucose is now spared and is not under the influence or is not being acted upon by insulin. The second thing that happens, it decreases the mother's ability to use her glucose. It decreases maternal glucose utilization. Why? So that the glucose that's not being acted upon by the insulin can be used for the baby, right? Now, so these 2 points are in favor of the baby. First, because insulin insensitivity, so that elevates the blood glucose. And mother's blood glucose level, it decreases. The mother's blood glucose utilization decreases, and that glucose would now go to the baby. So these 2 points are in favor of the baby's development. However, now the body knows that, oh, the mom is not using glucose, right? But we need her to have something, right? It's not that we will be spraying her of glucose, and where will she get the nutrition from? So what the body does is HPL now comes in and it caters for the mother. It starts something which is called lipolysis, which is the breakdown and release of fat. So it's more like, the HPL is saying, mom, oh, since we're preventing you from glucose and you also need to have something for energy, we'll help you with the process of lipolysis and you can utilize this fatty acid. Okay, so remember these 3 points. It decreases maternal insulin sensitivity, elevating blood glucose, decreases maternal glucose utilization, and also the last point is it increases lipolysis and release of free fatty acids for the mother. Okay, all right, we're almost nearing the end. Let me see if I have any questions. Okay, I don't have any questions. Just it's just like a summary. So we spoke about the maternal side, the placental side, and the fetal side. Okay, so the placenta, it releases the hormones estradiol, CRH, HPL, progesterone. Estradiol is basically estrogen. So here they're saying that when the placenta, it secretes estradiol, and remember when I said that when estrogen is produced, it basically gets this androgen DHEAS from the fetus, which is desulfated, and then estradiol is produced. This estradiol would help to in the production of prolactin in the mother. Okay, CRH, which is a corticotropin releasing hormone, it releases the hormone called cortisol in the mother. Remember, one thing from cortisol that you should not forget is that cortisol is a stress hormone. Let me write this like this. It's a stress hormone and it's very important during the time of labor. Okay, so CRH produced in placenta would cause the formation of cortisol. Also, human placental lactogen is produced here. Progesterone is produced here. Okay, so what do these placental hormones have an effect on the mother? Okay, so when I'm talking about this, I'm actually talking about the mother side, this one. So what happens is that these hormones, they produce an anti-insulin effect. Remember when I told that HPL, it basically decreases the mother sensitivity to insulin. So now the mother has the anti-insulin effect. As a result, the glucose that is not being acted upon from the insulin is now transferred to the baby. Okay, remember this is the fetal side, so it's transported to the baby. Also, the mother, these hormones have a proteolytic effect, which means there is breakdown of proteins, and those amino acids then go to the baby. And lipolytic effect, like I said, HPL, it increases the lipolytic activity because now the mom needs to get energy from somewhere. She's not getting the glucose because that glucose is being given to the baby. So the mom is getting free fatty acids. And also, anti-insulin effect means having hyperinsulinemia because the glucose is now spared and insulin is not acting on it, but the body still keeps on producing more and more and more insulin. So what she will have is hyperinsulinemia. All right. Okay. Let's go. Yeah, one main point here is when there is insulin resistant, it's going to increase the blood glucose level when HPL is produced. So that's going to cause gestational diabetes. All right. That is a form of diabetes that the mother has during pregnancy. Once after birth, the diabetes would be gone. Now, placental hormone regulation during week 40 gestation. This wasn't in your slides, but we had this back then, and we also had questions from this. Now, human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. Remember, I told that it keeps the corpus luteum alive. Because it keeps the corpus luteum alive, progesterone is produced. This process happens till week 10. So at week 10, human chorionic gonadotropin, it's basically helping in the survival, or it keeps the corpus luteum alive to produce progesterone. And after week 10, when the syncytial trophoblasts take over this role of producing progesterone, so then the human chorionic gonadotropin decreases because the corpus luteum is no longer there after week 10. Progesterone keeps on increasing continuously during pregnancy. Human placental lactogen keeps on increasing continuously during pregnancy. Okay. All right. Also, the estrogen hormones, they increase during pregnancy. Okay. All right. We basically have the checkpoints here, which are some questions. So I'll discuss the questions. Which of the following is responsible for the complete degradation of zona pellucida during implantation? A is calcium secretion from phospholipase C. B, it is acrosomal reaction. C, it is trophoblast. D, syncytial trophoblast. And E, it is cytotrophoblast. I would say that you guys pause the video here and think of the answer so that you guys can know the explanation later. And you guys can know if you guys scored correct or not. So the answer here is obviously C, trophoblast. Remember how I told there is a process of hatching, and when trophoblasts, they release the enzyme called proteases. They release the enzyme called proteases. No, someone answered B. It's not B. Acrosomal reaction is not during this time. I'll get back to the acrosomal reaction, but let me explain this question. So trophoblasts are involved in hatching of the blastocyst. It's involved in removing the zona pellucida around it. So when zona pellucida is degraded, there is implantation that occurs. Coming back to your option B, Zahra, you said it's acrosome reaction. Let me explain you what acrosomal reaction is here. So acrosomal reaction is basically the reaction of the sperm. And this reaction is basically involved in production of acrosome. And this acrosome is involved in breaching or invading the zona pellucida. The question asked us, let me go back to the question. The question asked us, which of the following is responsible for degradation of zona pellucida during implantation? They did not say during fertilization. If they say during fertilization, then your answer B would be correct, because then the sperm is releasing acrosome, and acrosome is breaching the layer. Also, it's like kind of breaching the layer. It's not completely degrading the layer of zona pellucida. Is that clear, Zahra? Okay, I think we can go to the next question then. Which of the following represents the HCG during gestational life? Remember, I told that there's something about HCG that you need to remember, that it's involved in the maintenance of corpus luteum. Okay, so it does all of that until week 10, and then after week 10, syncytial trophoblasts take over the function of producing progesterone. Okay, someone answered B. Okay, let me go next. Okay, so for those of you who answered B, look at the picture B. You know how gestational age or the development of the fetus is all throughout like 36 to 40 weeks? So Zara, since you said B, B is not correct, because even though there is a decline at week 10, which is correct, like you're right when it comes to this week 10 point, you're correct. But then the gestational age is stopping at 12 weeks. No, the fetus takes like around 40 weeks to develop. So the graph should be like this then, right? Do you understand, Zara? So the graph would be like this. So more specifically, the answer would be C. Look, at C, there is increased level of human chorionic gonadotropin, right? Yeah, sorry, the HCG. And at week 10, there is a decline in the spike. Why? Because now the syncytial trophoblasts, they take over the function of producing progesterone. So now the HCG does not need to maintain the development of corpus luteum in order to produce progesterone. But doesn't it disappear by week 10? Zahra, it doesn't disappear. It declines. HCG basically declines till week 40. And also when you're talking about week 10 here, look, the graphs here is ending at 11 weeks, okay? So a baby it's more like saying that the baby just developed for 11 weeks, which is not possible, right? Then that can be a miscarriage in that case. All right, so it takes 36 to 40 weeks to develop, and until week 10 it's alive because it keeps the corpus luteum alive, which produces progesterone. Main reason why there is a spike here is because until week 10 HCG is involved in the maintenance of corpus luteum to produce progesterone. After week 10, there is more development. After week 10, the syncytial trophoblasts, they take over the function of producing progesterone. So that is why there is a decline here. All right, let's go to the next question. And you can read these notes. These are from my slides, which says that upon implantation, the syncytial trophoblast secretes HCG, which keeps the corpus luteum alive, ensuring continuous progesterone secretion, crucial for maintaining pregnancy. And after week 10, the progesterone is being produced independently and it's no longer depending on corpus luteum or HCG. Okay, next one. A normal placental progesterone synthesis can occur in pregnancies in which fetal steroidogenic organs, adrenal cortex, testis, ovary, cannot efficiently make progesterone. This is because the placental progesterone synthesis is not dependent on what? It was a very important point I mentioned there that you guys need to know this. Like, it's important for other hormones, for the steroidogenesis in other organs, but not in placenta. Okay. Wow, that's nice. Good job, Zara. Yes, the answer is D. It's steroidogenic acute regulatory protein, which basically is a protein that is normally used for steroidogenesis in testes, in ovary, or in adrenal cortex, but it's not present in the placenta. Okay, good job. So the answer is D. You guys can read these notes from my slides. Final question. A 44-year-old woman presents to her physician complaining of no menstrual bleeding for 2 times. Okay, so when you get questions like these in the exam, make sure to highlight the important stuff. She says that she has not experienced this problem before and that she usually experiences regular 28-day cycles. She recalls that she had intercourse several times about 8 weeks ago, and blood tests are ordered for further analysis. Which of the following hormonal combinations would be expected if there is a normal pregnancy? Okay, what do you guys think the answer is? Okay, someone said C, and the answer is actually E. Zara, it says, okay, so here's the question. Let me read the question again. It's saying that a 44-year-old woman, which is likely in her age of fertility, she did not have menstrual bleeding for the last 2 times. So, and they also mentioned that she is pregnant. So if she has no menstrual bleeding for the last 2 times, it means that there must be around 8 weeks that have passed now. So what happens that when those 8 weeks are passed, remember one point when I mentioned about human chorionic gonadotropin, that it peaks at week 10. So as for now, per the question, 8 weeks have passed since her pregnancy. Okay, so there will be an increase in human chorionic gonadotropin. Okay, remember HCG spikes till week 10, and this woman is pregnant since the last 8 weeks. So there would be an increase. If it's measured by a blood test, HCG would be increased because now 8 weeks have passed and HCG increases till week 10. I hope it's clear. And progesterone is also responsible for increased production, for increasing throughout the pregnancy in order to maintain the pregnant state of the uterus. Okay, so for that reason, the answer is increased HCG and increased progesterone. I have a question here. But isn't HPL also increasing because it's like progesterone? Okay. Okay. So human placental lactogen, yes, you're right. You're absolutely right, Zahra. It rises throughout the pregnancy. It's produced by the syncytial trophoblast by day 10, and it's similar to GH and prolactin. Let me read the question again. I think you're right here. Increase human, increase progesterone. To non-experience problem and that change the experience is regular to be. Yeah, absolutely. Human placental lactogen is also increased, progesterone is also increased, and since that woman was pregnant for the last 8 weeks, which is around here, her HCG is also increased. I think there can be something wrong in the question. I will definitely check this question again. But you're correct, Zahra. Thank you so much for raising that point. Yes, human placental lactogen can also be increased upon blood tests. Okay, so good job. Good job that you pointed it out. So HCG, progesterone, and even human placental lactogen is increased during that time. Okay. And yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you very much for attending the session. If you have any question, please feel free to get back to me. And please, since it's the last 10 days of Ramadan, remember all of us in your prayers. And I hope you guys are having a blessed Ramadan. And I will be more than happy to help you guys in EndoRepro. I love EndoRepro. So thank you very much. And I hope everyone has a great break. Please study during the break. And inshallah, everything goes well. Yeah, that's it.